Hi everyone! Welcome to episode 4 and the Christmas special of This Week in the TERF Wars. Sorry for the slight delay there. I had a frantic getting ready. I was like, I'm going to put on a Christmas outfit, and then I couldn't find it, and then I hadn't done dried my hair, and it was all a complete fiasco. But anyway, I'm here, so I'm just going to check on the sound and see what everyone's saying about that. So, okay, thank you very much for letting me know. I'm always just paranoid about the sound. So, anyway, this is This Week in the TERF Wars. Thank you for coming to join us. So, this show is where I go through the last week's worth of nonsense from anti-trans people, not just TERFs, but like the gender critical movement and just general transphobes. This week we've got quite a lot in from Elon Musk fanboys. So, yeah, should be good. And I'm just going to say at the start of every episode, I've anonymized all of these people. So please don't go and hunt them down to harass them or anything. Like, we're discussing the ideas here, not the people. Apart from in a couple of occasions where someone's like quite famous, which we do have 2 this week. In which case, you know, sometimes you do need to discuss the person along with the idea. But anyway, let's get on to it. We've got quite a few this week. We have quite a few every week. Like every single week, I think, oh no, there's not going to be enough. And I'm going through and I'm like, oh, you know, looking through and I just put, and then suddenly I've got a folder of like 60 things and I have to like cut them down to just the the most ridiculous ones. Anyway, let's get on to it. Oh, I hope you like the snow effect. It's whoops. Yay! Technical issues every single time. So, no, it's all good. It's good. Right. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is start with some bad news. I'm afraid, for anyone who's been watching the other previous episodes of This Week in the TERF Wars, we've been following this guy every single week because I was joking about how he's made this tweet and pinned it to his profile like last month, and no one's liked it. And I just think it's really funny when people post these like, huh, this is my opinion tweets, and then no one listens to them. So we've been following him to see whether he's going to get a like or get suspended first. And he got suspended. No one ever liked his pinned tweet. So bye-bye, little grumpy man. Thanks for your opinion. I thought it was rubbish. Right, okay, so talking of kind of well-known people, this is the first thing that I'm going to cover. So this is Stephen Hassan, who I actually really like his work, though, as we'll see, not all of it. He's done a lot of work on cults, like particularly religious cults. He used to be in a religious cult, and he's developed this thing called the bite model, which like you can use to analyze whether a group or a movement like has cult-like tendencies or is a cult and things. And it's very interesting to like discuss this bite model, and I think it's quite good. And lots of the people I discuss who deal with cults, you know, use it or base their work upon it. But he's somehow got it in his idea that being trans is a cult. And I know lots of people say that, but this guy's reasons are even more ridiculous than usual. And it's focusing around sissy hypno porn. So this week, Pornhub decided to get rid of a large percentage of their videos. There's been a lot of criticism for Pornhub. It's been hosting rape videos and paedophilia and all kinds of like disgusting stuff. And it, you know, even if you, wherever your position on sex work and porn is, I think it needs more regulation, or Pornhub did need more regulation, and it's made some steps. So I don't know, I haven't analysed it enough. But Stephen Hassan decided to comment on this by saying, I hope they're deleting all the hypnosis videos. I watched 2 videos to convince people they were another gender. What I saw was highly sophisticated mind control. Detransition has pointed them out to me. So sissy hypnoporn is like, I don't know, so there's some people who get off to the idea of being forced to be usually forced to be a woman, but I guess forced to be a man too, as some kind of like humiliation thing. And I don't know, but it's just like some weird porn thing. It's nothing to do with being trans. And even like, which it just doesn't make any sense at all. But like, it's so frustrating. No one is trans because they watched a hypnosis video. You couldn't hypnotize people into being trans. You can't convince someone into being trans. They're either born it or not. Otherwise, you could hypnotize people out of being trans. And we know that doesn't work because no type of conversion therapy works on any LGBT people. So that's already completely ridiculous. But then just like the fact that it's porn just makes it funnier because there's so much weird porn. Like whatever you can imagine. I mean, rule 34 from the internet is whatever you can imagine, there's already porn of it. And that's kind of true. So of course this weird stuff exists. Anyway, it's kind of disappointing and kind of funny when someone you respect comes out with such a garbage take. Like this is sometimes, you know, when some celebrity comes out with some anti-trans bullshit, it's stressful. But this isn't stressful because it's so nonsense. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So, this is a very classic. So just going back to the gender critical movement, this is a very classic gender critical argument style, and I think we actually covered one of these last week. So, I've made there's a thought question argument that I often make to people who insist that sex is a strict binary that can't change. So I say, well, what is sex? If in the future we're going to have more and more medical advances, in an imaginary future, which advance would we need for you to be convinced that someone has changed sex? So, for example, if you said, a man is someone with XY chromosomes, then that would mean in the future, if we could change someone to have XY chromosomes, then they would be a man in your eyes. So what is it for you that's required? And they never want to answer this because it's worth thinking about, but if you do think about it, then any single answer is going to be ridiculous. Because if I just got a random woman and like magicked her to have XY chromosomes, it wouldn't affect her life at all, and she wouldn't just suddenly be a man, obviously. And it's the same with gametes or whatever they want to say. So they usually just deflect, or sometimes they say it's impossible, and just refuse to engage at all. And sometimes they try and do this other argument strategy of, oh, well, if you were to do that, then there'd be a different person, so I don't need to answer your question. But anyway, this guy's gone for, it's not possible. So I'm like, well, that's rubbish, mate. Like, come on, what do you need to change and why? If like you're claiming sex is a real biological thing, then we can just change whatever it is and someone would have changed sex. And if it's not, and you're saying it's impossible, then it's clearly like some magical essence or a soul or something, and it isn't a biological characteristic. And the argument is no. Yep, I don't know. I think sometimes you can just break people's brains, and they just get to this point where, like, I don't, like, if I think about this, then I know it's encroaching on damaging my worldview, so you get this horrible cognitive dissonance. And if you, like, this is when people often go for insults or they go for a deflection on the change, and if you really pin them down, quite often they'll just say no or block you or, so that was quite funny. Oh, this was a good little comment. Someone says, too many Katies, too many trans rights activists, too many woke femmes. I was like, oh, I'm contributing to the problem. Isn't that good to know? Right, so this one's so ridiculous. I'm just feeling paranoid about the sound again. So I'm just gonna very quickly check. Yeah, everyone can still hear me. Okay, that's totally fine. Sorry. Oh no, I did it again. Oh, don't look. What an idiot. Right, okay. I'm just being paranoid. Right, okay, so this one, you got a sneak peek behind the scenes there. So this person says, do you have any idea how rapey it comes across when you try and force your worldview on others against their will? Which is a pretty grim thing to say, like full stop, because disagreeing with someone isn't rapey. I mean, it's pretty horrible. So I said, providing evidence that someone is wrong is not rapey. So that's what's gone on above. They made a claim, and I said, well, here's some evidence that you're wrong. And then they've tried to like come up with an excuse to not have to engage with my evidence. And I said, what a disgusting, disrespectful thing to say, to call something rapey just because I'm disagreeing with it. It's completely nonsense. And they said, my analogy is perfect. It's the exact same thing. A refusal to accept that others enjoy opinion autonomy rather than a bodily autonomy. Like, there's this such a meme, when people are like, I'm entitled to my opinion. Like, yes, you're entitled to your opinion. But if your opinion is irrational, internally contradictory, or not based on any evidence at all, then it's literally worthless. Like, of course you can have it. I don't care what opinion you have. But if you bring your opinion to the table in any discussion and it's bullshit, then we're going to say it. And everyone's going to say it. And everyone's going to laugh at you because it's a bullshit opinion. And you have the option of either keeping your stupid opinion, which is objectively nonsense, or you could look at the evidence or come up with a logical worldview and change your mind. And people don't want to. They often, you can give them any amount of evidence and they're not going to change their opinion because they've decided, it's like opinions. It's almost like facts are just a choice. Like, oh, sure, you've got evidence, but I've just chosen to not have any evidence. So I don't need evidence. And to try and link it to rape and call it opinion autonomy, like, I totally agree, mate. You do seem to have an autonomy from the facts. Like, they are not interfering in your worldview at all. So, yeah, I'll let you have your opinion autonomy. I will stop providing evidence for anything, ever. And that way no one will have to ever change their mind. Oh. So these are a few bit scattered around ones. We were just encountering on early in the week. And there's a couple of main themes coming up. So this person is the shoe lady, who is the person who famously arrived at a women's youth hostel late at night, walked in the entrance and saw some size 8 women's shoes and concluded that therefore there was a trans woman staying there and that this trans woman was self-ID, which seems to mean all kinds of nonsense to them, but I don't know how you could judge that from someone's shoes. And then decided to not stay there and drove home instead. And then they said, when they were saying about it, they're like, I risked my life because of this self-ID or something. It's like, you risked your life because you were an idiot. And you also risked other people's lives because you were driving tired when you should have been sleeping because you saw some shoes. Anyway, shoe lady says, if a woman says she's male, has a baby, gives blood, and her true sex is not recorded true sex, right? This blood will kill a man during a blood transfusion. In this case, the truth is vital. So, I mean, that's obviously nonsense. The vague thing this is weakly based on is that organ transplants, and I presume blood transfusions, can have different success rates based on a whole number of factors. I mean, obviously, blood type's a major factor, but there is a lot of studies showing that organ transplants between men and women have different success rates than between women and women and men and men. And I think the last one I read was saying about kidneys, and basically both men and women are more likely to have a successful transplant if the kidney comes from a man, I think. But I'm not certain of that, so it's worth looking up that and not taking my word for it. But that's what this is loosely based on. And it's not going to kill you if it's from a trans man. It's completely nonsense. And they said, so I thought this next sentence was sarcastic, but then I'm not actually sure it was. They said, I read it on the internet, therefore it's true. Which is the kind of sarcastic thing you say to someone who has made a claim. Like trans men's blood would kill cis men. So I think that might have just been a sarcasm fail. Ask the many medics and doctors on here. I mean, Twitter is definitely the place to get medical advice from. I'm not tagging anyone, as it's unfair to drag them into a pylon by your many followers. But if you're tagging people in, you're doing the pylon. So, I don't know. That was just all complete nonsense. On form for She Lady, I think. So, this one was one of the main themes. Elon Musk, yet again, got offended by pronouns. He seems to have an issue with pronouns for some reason. A while ago, he just tweeted pronouns suck, and his wife or the mother of his child argued with him on Twitter about it, which is quite embarrassing, I guess. But anyway, so he posted some nonsense meme which didn't really make any sense. So I drew this meme, and I think it's very well crafted and doesn't have too many words in the slightest. Basically, it's got someone saying, my pronouns are they or them, and then it's got some cool Elon Musk fanboy going, this is oppression. And then the other option is someone saying my pronouns are they, them, and someone else just being like, all right. Because, I mean, that's the situation. It's just not, it's not a valid thing to get offended by. But of course, they were all relentlessly offended by this. But there was quite a few funny responses. This guy was obviously the coolest reply of all. He said, I'll do whatever I want. I'll say whatever I want. Do you with any regard for anyone else? All right, cool. I'm sure you're a real hard man, mate. Don't care about what anyone thinks. I don't care what you're saying. Leave me alone, Mum. But anyway, lots of the responses to this were just people literally doing the meme. So this guy handily fixed my meme, which already had too many words in it, with just this mess. Even when you zoom in, you couldn't read it because it was so compressed because there's so much writing there. And the meme is that when someone says my pronouns are they or them, someone goes on some big tirade about nonsense, and he's literally doing the meme, and he wasn't the only one. This guy went on for ages, so he's like, nope, you can call yourself anything you want, but you can't force anyone to change their language to fit your sexual tendencies. So I thought, well, this guy's too dumb to properly engage with or explain what a sexual tendency is or why that's not relevant. So I just remade the meme and put what he said in the text box of the person getting offended. But he just kept going. So this is the same guy, and he's like, this is flawed and blah, 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 tweet one of 15 or something. So I just, every single tweet he replied, I just put his new tweet in the box, which made me feel really clever. But yeah, just kept going, and they eventually ended up getting onto communism, and he's like, communism's killed millions around the globe. This is from someone being like, there's the meme, someone's like, oh, I don't like pronouns, and I'm like, mate, getting offended over pronouns is ridiculous. And now he's on tweet 15 saying about why communism is a global evil or something. Mate, just call them they and just fuck off. Who cares? Why do you care? It's not about communists, it's just about you being a bellend. So yeah, Elon Musk fanboys are quite fun to wind up because it was a nice change actually from battling gender critical people, because although they're all idiots, they just say what they're thinking. They'll just say all trans people should be banned from public spaces, or they'll just say being trans is mental illness or whatever. They'll just come out with what they actually think, and so you can disagree with what they actually think, and they won't try and present it as if they're the ones who are concerned about trans rights and you're the real transphobe. And it's just quite refreshing to not have any constant gaslighting and denying what they actually think and stuff. So yeah, so this is a very, very common thing that I get, and this isn't a flex, by the way, but this person says, you don't give two shits about trans people and your vapid attention-seeking fake. And I think why I put this one in wasn't just a boast that they didn't clock me, because I mean, that could happen to anyone who doesn't have trans in their bio. But there's this kind of idea that if you believe in anything that doesn't directly affect you, that you're just virtue signaling. So even if I was, a cis person, what I said here was still true, but they're trying to come up with an excuse to not engage with it and to just say, oh, this is just virtue signaling or something. But it's also just extra funny when it's a cell phone because they're accusing me of not caring about trans people when I'm a trans people. So that was quite funny. So this one made me laugh. He, him are this man's God-given pronouns. Anything other than speaking the truth is just mental fucking insanity. So I'm not sure that, I mean, perhaps this guy's God is English and designed the English language. Perhaps he has evidence for that. Perhaps he should call into one of the call-in shows I'm on and convert me to his God speaks modern English religion. But in the real world, pronouns evolved over time as language evolved. So that was it's like biological pronouns, which is ridiculous. Actually, maybe biological pronouns is even more ridiculous than God-given pronouns. Because at least potentially there was a God that created the universe the day before I was born and invented the concept of pronouns at that moment. And I can't prove otherwise because I wasn't there. Potentially. But biological pronouns, which is a Ben Shapiro famous thing, suggests that like pronouns are written on your DNA or something. So that's complete nonsense. Right, so this is another very common, so I should have probably put this with the no guy from earlier. So I put them next to each other because it stretched out a bit. But this guy's come in and he's like, do you believe in science? Is this what your libtards keep screeching? Well, all that, it's just generic reactionary nonsense that's not even really worth reading. But they did the classic, oh, well, when they dig up your bones in 1,000 years, they'll be like, oh, this is a man's bones. As if that's remotely important to my life today. It isn't. And like, I mean, that's enough argument on its own, but obviously they would have to be able to think about that argument. It's nonsense. And it's much easier to just prove that they're wrong on that. Or they also call being trans mental illness. So I just replied with two papers or two sources. One saying how difficult it is to identify whether bones are male or female when you don't know the culture, as culture is an important thing they use for sexing bones. And then secondly, the fact that being trans isn't a mental illness. And then their reply to that was just some meme. Like, who cares about your facts? It's just like a 3-year-old. You're like, well, no, that's wrong because look, the moon does exist. We can see it. And then just like, you're a poo head, and run off. Like, okay, yeah, good assume your gender's meme from 2003, mate. I'm really impressed at your intellect. Elon Musk would be proud. So, after dunking on Elon Musk fanboys for some time, I got this weird DM. I get a lot of weird DMs. And this guy said, do you offer misogyny correction courses? And then instantly blocked me. So I thought this was sarcastic, like he's been like, oh, you're such a like controlling, dumb feminist. Like, why don't you just charge people to, just like some sarcastic jab at me telling people they're misogynists or whatever. I don't actually think I did call anyone that in the whole exchange. But anyway, so I said that, and I posted about this because I was like, oh, what this guy just said this weird thing and blocked me. But when I posted about it, someone else messaged me and was like, I will also pay for correction courses. So I think this is a sex thing, isn't it? People apparently want to pay for courses telling them not to be misogynist. I don't know. I mean, I guess the course that they actually want is like some humiliation thing. So any sex workers in the audience, perhaps you should investigate into that. They probably don't actually want a lecture from a feminist, because if they did, they would just pay for one or go on YouTube. Anyway, that was an interesting discovery. Every now and then I discover some interesting weird thing. That's actually how I discovered the existence of sissy hypnoporn, because someone sent me it in a Twitter DM. I was like, oh, this is horrifying. And that's also where I found out about fin subs and fin doms, which maybe you can Google in your own time, not on your work computer. So next, this is one of our favorite gender critical people, who you might work out who it is. From the opening start, this is a very common argument which comes up a lot. And so they've said, I asked people whether they believe that women and girls should have the right to undress in a space away from people with a penis. You all know who this is. You want to frame this as my being obsessed with penises because you don't want me to ask the question of people because it shows the problem. I mean, that isn't actually my personal issue with this question is that this person quote tweets me every single week and tries to start some pile-on on me where everyone says penis at me over and over and over again. The answer to this question is, like today we have a system where there are men's and women's changing rooms and trans people use them when they feel they're right for them, and the system works. There isn't issues with like specifically trans people waving their genitals around or anything nonsense like that. And if we did try and regulate it, I mean, first of all, trying to regulate it would be very difficult. I mean, what do you want? Do you want guards on the doors or genital inspectors or the power to just randomly accuse people of being a man and just getting random women kicked out, which we know always ends up in mainly cis women being targeted. So this is a problem that we don't have, that you're asking for a solution for. But then secondly, the solution is cubicles, because like your imaginary problem doesn't exist, but having cubicles would solve that problem. But also the actual problem of sometimes there are sex offences in changing rooms. I mean, you can argue or not whether that's a significant problem worthy of big change or anything. But personally, I hate open changing rooms. I don't know why anyone uses them. There should always be cubicles. And like most of the people who commit sex crimes, 99% of them are cis people, and that includes cis women. In fact, by some estimates, if you take the low estimate of the number of trans people there are in the country and like the middle or higher estimate of the number of cis women sex offenders, there's actually more cis women sex offenders than there are trans women in total. It's quite possibly not that, but it's a similar order of magnitude. So if you did have a problem with sex crimes in open changing rooms, then banning trans women isn't, even in your perfect world where your ban is magic and only gets the right people and like you don't have to police it, it's not going to cost loads of money and it doesn't increase oppression against a vulnerable minority of people. Even if none of that was true and it all just magically worked, you still wouldn't have even addressed 1% of the sex crime problem which you're proposing that exists. And cubicles does solve that. So completely nonsense. But anyway, so they've said, I asked whether people believe that women and girls should have the right to undress in a space away from other people. Yes. I mean, no one should not have the right to undress in private. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's the answer to the question. Should people have the right to get undressed in private? Yes. I think everyone should have the right to cubicles. There shouldn't be any situation where you're forced to undress in front of people. And then they replied, that just proves your evasion once more. So the reason this counts as evasion is because what the answer that they want is they either want you to say, yes, I want naked penises in front of your daughter, so they can screenshot it and say, this is what the crazy trans people want. Or they want you to say, no, I want you to ban trans women from women's spaces that they've used for their entire lives without issue. And if you don't pick one of those two bullshit false dichotomy answers, then you're evading the question. Like, well done. Okay, so that's just a classic have you stopped hitting your wife yet scenario where the answer is, I've never hit them, not yes or no. When anyone's constantly demanding yes or no, it's usually because they're setting up some bullshit trap that they think is a zinger and not actually making a real argument. And of course, I've answered this question 1,000 times before. I've actually started writing an article for it, so you can just paste in the answer, because everyone's seen this question enough and everyone's answered it before, and still everyone has to pretend that trans people never answer it or that the answer's confusing. Anyway, moving on. So it's a couple on this discussion. So I was just saying about, people have answered this question and there's a solution which addresses an actual problem and fixes the imaginary problem. And the alternative is a bullshit thing which hurts a load of people and doesn't help anyone. And then just imagine accusing people of evading because you didn't get tripped up in your nonsense. And then this person's come in with a very strong argument. Imagine wanting to be a man waving your erection in front of young girls in a public locker room or the local rape crisis centre and calling it your human right. Of course, in your case, my case, not so much imagine as remember the last time you did it, which was when? This morning. So they started off strong in the nonsense land of, classic, a classic trans person's demand is to be a man, not even demanding as a woman, and not just to use these facilities, but to wave your genitals around in front of people, which shouldn't be a right for anyone. Like, getting undressed and waving your genitals around are actually different things. Like, if I have to get undressed in a private changing room, I'll do it under a towel, quickly, in the corner, facing the wall, because I don't want anyone to see. But if people are waving their genitals around, then that's exhibitionism. It's not the same situation. And then no one's calling that a right, but then they had to step it up to accusing me of doing that, which is complete nonsense, and then step it up again and claim that it happened that morning in lockdown in all the public changing rooms which are currently open. Like this these things make me laugh so much because they're just so desperate. Like, this is so pathetic. This is your argument for banning trans women for ruining my life, basically. Your argument is some weird scenario where you're imagining what genitals I have being waved around in a changing room this morning. Like, you're just a pervert. It's so ridiculous. So this person says, so this was an argument against cubicles. For a long time, they've all just completely ignored the argument of cubicles, but they've started now addressing it. And half of them seem to say, you can't have cubicles everywhere. And the other half seem to say cubicles are bad. So this is a cubicles are bad person. And they've said, you seem to have an opinion on something you've got no experience of. Take 3 kids swimming with you next time and come back and tell me how easy it was. So that's in response to, they were arguing that cubicles are too hard to have 3 kids in, I guess. So no, I don't have children. But when I was a kid, and with my 2 brothers, my mum took us all swimming and we all went to a family cubicle and we changed together because that's how it works. I'm sure there are some places where, a gym or something doesn't have family cubicles, but surely swimming pools do. And if they don't, they should have to. And if they don't, then we can install them in a way that works, because I remember doing it in the 90s. So it's doable. It's just such a stupid argument. I think there's definitely an essence here of trying to say, well, you're never even going to have kids, which isn't true. I hope to one day. It's more nonsense, just desperate scraping to try and imagine what they're really saying here is, I want to segregate away a minority and take away their freedoms, even though there's no issue with what they're doing today. And they're like, oh, well, okay, I'll just take your completely bullshit concern on board and I actually have a better solution. And they've said, no, I don't want the good solution. I want the bad solution. And the reason is... And then they come up with this. It's just absolutely pathetic. Everyone do a shot every time I say pathetic. So this is me saying, trans women have always used women's spaces, which is probably something I'm going to say every single week on this stupid show, because it's like that. If you are a gender critical person, you should know what the current state of affairs is. You should know that trans women are already everywhere. Like, it's so basic. It should be like on all their websites that indoctrinate them. That should be the reason it's not the opening claim is because it would stop a lot of them getting indoctrinated. But if it was a valid, real movement with actual ideological positions that weren't bullshit and irrational prejudice, then, how to argue your case, it would start with, well, don't try and claim that trans women have never used women's spaces because it's garbage. But then they've said, well, then why are you fighting to change the law if they've always used it? I'm not. No trans people in the UK are trying to change the law on women's spaces because we already use them. They've like come up with their own propaganda that they're defending women because whenever you're a bullshit anti-minority movement, you always have to say you're in the defence so that you can't be accused of being the aggressor. And so they like to pretend they're defending something. But what if they were defending what we have? Then I'm fine with that. So I did reply to them like, I'd be happy to sign a document with all the gender critical people saying we're not going to change the law on spaces. I'll do that. I'm sure every trans person would do that. That'd be great. But they won't. They'll just carry on pretending that they're defending whilst trying to change the law. Of course. Oh gosh, this one's a bit small. I don't even know if I can read it. What was I thinking? So what's the summary of this one? Oh, yeah. So this is our friend from earlier. And they said, someone made some comment about firing transphobes or something, or finding it hard to get work. And they said, well, I'm not going to have any problem because I'm a programmer. Programmers are learn to code. That's the meme, isn't it? Programmers for a long time probably going to find it easy to get jobs. And I've said, well, one day we might get to a position where trans people have enough structural power that transphobes will find it, like open transphobes will find it harder to get a job. Like, that is already happening. And it's happened with all the other minority movements. Like, back in the day when politicians were explicitly racist and like even more racist than they are now, racists could be in all the positions of power and they could just be openly racist. And then as culture started changing, they have to hide their racism a bit more. And obviously in some places they can still be quite racist, but, it's not like you're not going to win an election today by saying the N-word all the time. And it's the same with women's rights and it's the same with gay rights. Like, but as people get more power and, as society accepts them more, being openly bullshit makes it harder to get hired. So your option, it's your choice. You could just stop being an irrationally prejudiced dickhead, or you can code your language more, or you can still find like people who do openly say the N-word, or people who are openly misogynistic, or people who think that gay people should be banned from life or whatever. They still all have jobs. It's harder. You're not going to be prime minister, but you can, all of these people still get hired. You go and work for some bullshit news agency. Anyway, so it is quite a common feminist position to, obviously, like, that's the concept of the patriarchy, is that sexists have all the power, or at one point had all the power, and we're trying to even things out. Sorry. Disgusting. And like there are different ways to do it. There are some people who want like extreme action, like fire all of the misogynists straight away or put them all in jail or whatever. And there are other people who are like, well, we need to just educate people or change the system slowly from underneath or something. There's all different positions, but the general position is we don't want misogynists in power, because then women don't have any power, because the misogynists won't pick them and the whole system will be misogynist. But anyway, they've tried to pretend to be offended by this and said, you want to prevent me from getting hired? Actually, no. I don't want to prevent you from getting hired. I don't want to stop anyone from having a job. But if you're a misogynist or a homophobe or a transphobe, you're probably preventing women or gay people or trans people from getting jobs. You're making people's lives harder to live. You're creating a hostile work environment for people. You've probably got loads of subconscious biases as well as like your explicit ones, especially when you're being explicitly transphobic all the time, 24 hours a day on the internet. You're probably a shit person to work with. So just stop. Just stop doing that. I don't want you to lose your job, but if you're causing other people to lose their jobs, then it's your fault and you're gonna have to go. I mean, it's better than all the trans people going, isn't it? Because they're not causing the problem. So anyway, there was just loads of clawing and reaching with that. Too many words. Screw it. Next one. Right, so bit of a change of scene. This person just replied to some random tweet. This is completely unrelated. And they've said, so in my Twitter bio, it says like feminist, and then it's got like the female symbol, astrological symbol with a circle and a cross. And they've said, Katie, using the symbol for biological female instead of transgender in your bio isn't a harmless lie. Teenage girls will assume you represent biological females. You don't. You represent biological males. Why are you ashamed of being transgender? Why lie? And then they've handily linked the Wikipedia table of some signs, including what's the third one? Mercury, apparently, is one of them. So there's so much nonsense here. Firstly, I represent biological males. So I would just like to say on behalf of all men, as soon as this pandemic is over, all of us want to go on a really long, close shopping trip. That's on behalf of, because I represent biological males, obviously. I mean, look at me. So that's already nonsense. And like a symbol, this is a classic example of gender critical people enforcing, that's the gender police. They're just enforcing bullshit gender roles and stuff. It's a symbol. It's like some astrology nonsense. Like, I mean, I use it to represent feminism because that's what quite a lot of Twitter people seem to do. But it's meaningless, really. If it's not meaningless, but it's not like you can only have this if your chromosomes are a certain way. It just makes no sense, and it's just them trying to enforce. It's the same as the pronouns thing. They're like, God gave you these pronouns, biology gave you these pronouns, so that means you have to do this. And that's what gender roles are. It's like, God said that you're going to be a housewife. Your chromosomes say that you're more violent, so you're going to go out and fight on the front lines. It's this like strict gender role determinism stuff, which is bullshit, and it's everything that trans people oppose, and it's everything gender critical people claim to oppose whilst enforcing. But then the final point I'm going to say on this one, other than them suggesting that Mercury is a gender, or that if they think that sex is binary, then clearly I should have the male or the female one and the trans one. All nonsense. But they've then made this probably the most offensive bit of it all. The idea that cis girls would be tricked by having me as a role model. Like, if any cis girls do have me as a role model, then I'm really honoured. But there's nothing, there are much better trans women to idolise, or just women in general to idolise than me. But, so what if cis girls idolise trans women? So what if, trans girls idolise cis women, because there are loads more cis women, but just all women, it's good to have some kind of role models, and some women are just fit your vibe, or they they represent what you want to be, or they inspire you. Why does it matter if they're a cis person or trans person? It doesn't matter at all. Nonsense. I mean, they don't have to be a woman, obviously, but people identify with certain things, and it can inspire them to do good. It's just they're just like they're worrying. It's just like they're taking our daughters, they're replacing us. It's just that kind of like, I don't know what it's called, like generational stress or something. It's like this idea that you're being replaced. Like, oh, soon all of my daughters are going to be looking up to trans women, and that's bad for some reason. It's just pathetic. So this guy claims to have literally seen trans men, threatening violence to women if they don't accept them as women. I don't think you have, mate. This is another example of when you're in some ridiculous hate movement that refuses to even use the proper terms, you just get all the terms mixed up. That's nonsense. Just a funny slip up there. So this person says, I most definitely fancy David Beckham because of his arse, thighs, and penis. I haven't ever seen David Beckham's penis. I did actually do a Google just to see if there'd been a leak. I didn't go and looking for his photos, but some celebrities have had some leak and thought maybe you've seen some link of David Beckham. But as far as I could tell from a 3-second Google search, his penis hasn't leaked onto the internet. But I mean, maybe, I'm sure there are some people who are really into genitals, and maybe they're attracted to some porn stars, or some celebrities have leaked photos, or even their partners, because of their genitals. But it does seem a bit weird to be attracted to some random celebrity, like genitals can be part of it, but like to highlight it as the number the 3 reasons. Like, surely David Beckham's he's got an attractive face, or you like his voice, or his personality. Like, surely all of these things become before penis. I mean, the argument they're trying to make here is the classic, they want to say that straight men and gay women aren't attracted to trans women, and straight women and gay men aren't attracted to trans men. That they want to enforce that as a general knowledge thing. And it's obviously nonsense. This is usually motivated by homophobia of some kind, because the majority of people doing this are straight cis men who are getting anxious about being attracted to trans women, because of course they are, because some trans women are like some of the hottest women on earth. And so they always try and do something about genitals, because lots of trans people have different genitals to their cis counterparts, but not all of them. So it's already a stupid argument, because some trans men do have penises, some trans women do have vaginas. That can pass, and you might not know. And some people have had sex with trans people without knowing it, whether you think that's moral or not. But they make it about genitals to try and argue that trans people are saying, oh, you have to be attracted to someone with genitals that you're not into, which is not what anyone's arguing. There's always someone arguing it, but that's not a trans rights position. You don't get to choose who you're attracted to. You're just attracted, your sexuality. People can't change their sexuality. And some people, apparently, are really into genitals, and some people aren't really into genitals at all, and some people, have different, there's a big range of sexuality. And there are some straight men who either don't care about genitals, or are attracted to both kinds of genitals, or all kinds of genitals, or, don't mind but prefer one over the other, or whatever. They exist. But sure, there are some people who aren't having some transphobic prejudice, who would just be like, I'm attracted to this person, and now I found out they have these genitals. I'm not attracted to them because genitals are a big thing for me. That's fine. But they always want to try and escalate it into the situation where trans people are forcing people to interact with genitals they're not attracted to, which is nonsense. And I think this is like an attempt to do that, to just try and use David Beckham and then talk about his penis. It's just so weak argument, such a weak argument. Oh, this guy who was disagreeing with all of the trans healthcare experts. Yesterday maybe, all of the international experts on trans healthcare all signed something saying that the UK's recent banning of trans kids under 16 from getting trans healthcare is scientifically bullshit and morally wrong, because it is. And that's what all the experts are saying. That's what the experts were saying before this. And now that's what, all the experts are saying now. But now the international community has made an official statement on this thing. And of course, all the gender critical people disagree with it, because they'll disagree with literally any science that disagrees with them. So this guy says, here's his justification for disagreeing with all of the international world experts, basing all of their opinions on decades of evidence. He says, I have a science degree from a decent university. So not like a medical doctor, because he would have said that. Probably not even a biology degree, or he would have said that. So it's probably physics or chemistry or some other kind of science. And it's not from Harvard or Cambridge, because he would have said that. And that's his excuse. I've got a type of science degree in an unrelated subject from an alright university, and that's why I have the authority to say all of the experts in the entire world are wrong. Ridiculous. Here's a little smug, only trans people have human rights? I think not. If only trans people had human rights, then that hashtag would make no sense. All humans have human rights. So this is them responding to trans rights are human rights, which is it's a slogan, and it's similar to Black Lives Matter. We're not saying, I don't think everyone knows this. We're not saying only Black Lives Matter. We're not saying only trans rights are human rights. No, just imagine sitting down with someone and trying to convince them that you genuinely think that only trans rights are human rights. Now, I don't care about cis people at all. Cis people don't deserve rights. It's just embarrassing. Why do they say these things? Is this really your best argument? It's just insulting that these people have so much power and should just be laughed out the room. It's such a joke. So this is an absolutely classic bigoted anti-LGBT view, which must be decades older than me. If we don't if you keep empowering these people, their sense of entitlement and belief that their behaviour is normal will grow. It will get to the stage where being gay and or trans will be compulsory. How are there still people saying this? It is so dumb, my God. It makes no sense at all. I'm not even going to address it. It's this so stupid. 15 likes. I mean, that's not loads, but it's enough. And this person is gender critical, by the way. I did check. Absolute nonsense. This is a classic. So I'm just pointing out, I've been pointing this out a lot recently, and I recommend you do too, because it seems to cause a lot of cognitive dissonance wriggling. That basically, the general patriarchy's position on trans rights is to oppose it. I mean, that's what we're up against. The status quo, the idea that everyone should be cis and straight and normal, and we should all have a straight marriage and have 2.4 kids and stuff. This kind of pressure to follow the typical biblical traditional 1950s stereotype style family and everything that involves, the family unit, the man's in charge, the the woman's a housewife and this stuff. That patriarchy position, those views, oppose gay rights, they oppose women's rights, they oppose loads of stuff, and obviously they oppose trans rights. No one who thinks that 1950s stereotypes are good, or that the man should be in head of the family and gay people shouldn't get married, none of them are pro-trans rights. Of course they're not. It's ridiculous. So I just am pointing that out a lot. Like, you're claiming to be a feminist, but a feminist is all about fighting these bullshit stereotypes and stuff. And all of them agree with you on trans rights. Even if you disagree on everything else. On trans rights, you're agreeing with the patriarchy position. So I've started saying, name one gender critical position on trans rights that isn't a patriarchy position on trans rights. And they've said, this person who's been claiming to be a feminist for ages has said, I can't name any because I don't know what the patriarchy positions on trans rights are. Well, thanks for being honest. Nonsense. So right now we've got another very classic gender critical argument. It's basically another no situation. We should start naming their arguments. This isn't quite a no. This is another classic. This is the I'm not going to engage with you, but I'm going to keep replying to you strategy. So we're talking about J.K. Rowling because of course we are. We have to be, because that's the mandated discourse all the time. Oh gosh, I've been talking too long. So I've said we know J.K. Rowling is factually incorrect. She wrote this big essay. You probably remember it. It's not just like I disagree with her. She said a lot of things that are just false. We can demonstrate they're false. We have the evidence. I wrote a really long article with the help of a lot of amazing people, which you can get from my Medium if you're interested in debunking basically the whole gender critical position. Like, she wrote this gender critical manifesto explaining all their ideas with no sources at all. That's quite important. So I wrote a counter argument to all of her claims, and all of my claims are sourced. There's primary evidence for all of them, which is throughout the article. So I've linked that. And this person who claims to have read my article says, where's her position factually incorrect? So was well, in my article, which bit of it is wrong? I went for, there are some of her positions I didn't address because I didn't disagree with them. I mean, there wasn't much. But if there's something in her essay that's a claim she's made and I haven't provided a counter to it, then maybe I'm neutral on it, maybe I agree with it. But the whole point of my article is, or of anyone's, I'm not the only person who's written one of these. There's possibly even better ones out there. It probably is. Loads of people have debunked her essay. In the weeks afterwards, there was hundreds of them. So anyway, I'm saying, well, which bit of my article is wrong? Because I've provided an argument. You said everything she said is true. So here's my reply. Which bit of my reply isn't true? Because potentially I've got something wrong. Potentially there's a piece of evidence I'm missing. Potentially one of the pieces of evidence I've linked is wrong. In which case, I would like it if someone went through and found it. If they're like, oh, this piece of evidence you've supplied here doesn't make sense, then good. Now I can learn the truth. I can improve my article or even change my mind to the gender critical position. And they're like, why don't you... So they claim to have read my article, but they haven't, obviously. They said, why don't you give us your best quote from your article? My best quote from a debunking article. The one that sums up the true horror of our transphobia. So I said, so you're not even going to say one thing I got factually incorrect. I'm giving you the opportunity. I've given you an article with 100 claims in it. Just pick one. Pick the weakest one in my article. And you'll embarrass me in front of everyone. Publicly, here. People are watching. 12 people have liked my thing. Just find a bit and be like, oh, actually, this bit here is incorrect. And then they've said, this is getting boring. One little quote showing her transphobia. That's all I ask. I've had people do this before. It's actually really common for people to do this kind of where they just keep asking the question when you've already given them the answer and just pretending you haven't. And I've had someone say before about a different article that I've written on J.K. Rowling. They're like, they just keep asking the question, and I'm like, well, I've answered literally your question in this article. That's the title of the article. And they're like, I'm not clicking on an article. So I just copied and pasted the entire article into tweets. Which, I mean, it's like 1,000 words, so it was quite a lot of tweets. And they blocked me. So I like being petty sometimes. Right, so this is our final one for this show. And on a Christmas theme, I thought I would do the single most Christmassy tweet that I've ever received. So, so this was received 2019, last Christmas, on Christmas Day at just before 1 a.m. on Christmas Day. From everyone's favourite ex-celebrity comedy writer, Graham Linehan, who doesn't like me. So we're talking about LGBT Alliance and Pink News. Pink News had written some article about them 16 hours previously, which is a reasonable time in the day to be tweeting, on Christmas. So Pink News had said LGBT Alliance are a hate group, because they are. And, you know, they probably sourced their own claims, I don't know. And I said, well, LGBT Alliance is a hate group. And someone said, mate, you're defending Pink News. Say no more. I was like, well, I'm not defending Pink News. I'm saying LGBT Alliance are a hate group, because they are. And I can back that up on my own without Pink News' help, because it's easy, because almost everything they do is obviously hate group stuff. And then our friend here has replied, they're not the ones getting lesbians banned. You're the hate group, Katie. So I woke up to this. Well, actually, no, I didn't wake up to this. I woke up on Christmas Day and opened my presents and then had a big family breakfast with my family. And we had a really nice time because it was Christmas Day. And I wasn't sad tweeting at 1 a.m. on my own to some random nobody. I wasn't a celebrity with 700,000 Twitter followers tweeting to someone who at the time had 10,000 Twitter followers. I don't know. Literally a nobody. I'm still a nobody. Yeah, I had a good Christmas, and I don't know when I saw this in the afternoon or something when I went on the internet. There's so many layers of pathetic here. So obviously the 1 a.m. one is quite sad. Christmas Day is quite sad. You know, I get tweeting late. I was tweeting till 2 a.m. last night, so I'm just as much of a loser on that. But not on Christmas Day, and I shan't be even this Christmas Day either. So the next thing to notice is calling me a hate group. I'm one person. So, no. Then the next pathetic thing, well, actually, possibly, I don't know, it's hard to know what's the most pathetic part of this, but it could be the fact that he's put my name in quotes. It's so embarrassing. Like, even if you hardline are a transphobe and you disagree with everything about trans rights and you hate trans people and you hate trans people, then I can choose my own name, because in the UK and in most countries in the world, that's the law. And it's very easy in the UK. You just sign a piece of paper that you can write yourself, which is what I did. And then that's my name. Like, there's literally, philosophically, it's my name, because a name is something you give to something, and I've given it to myself, and most people I know, that's the only name they've ever known me by. And it is, for everyone, the only name they call me by. It just suggests, like, this idea that it's not my real name, and there's like some God-given or biological name hiding underneath my... Like, names are a construct. We humans invented the concept of names and labelling. They don't exist outside of like humans. They're not objective. You don't have an objective name. It's like some kind of thing out of a fantasy novel, like everything has a true name, and if you speak it, then you have the power to cast spells on it or something. It's like, my true name is like So if you ever say that, then you'll have power over me to control me. But it's just so pathetic. Like, I could call any even the person I hate the most in the world, I'd still call them their name. It's just so embarrassing. Like, really, mate? On Christmas Day. So anyway, then the rest of the tweet is, I'm not the one getting lesbians banned. And at the time, I was like, what? What are you talking about? Who have I got banned? When? It turns out I found out what this was actually about. And this little bullshit thing, which he's made up, is the reason that I'm in Abigail Schreier's insane book against trans people. This irreversible damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. I'm in that book because of this thing that he's made up. So someone, some gender critical person, called me a man in a tweet, and got that was the final straw that got their account banned from Twitter, and they were off Twitter then. And somehow that was my fault. Like, even if I had reported it, and even if it was a successful report, which most things that you report aren't, even when it's really explicit. I've reported people calling me in much worse things than that, which is why I personally can't really be bothered to report, because I get these kinds of things like hourly, and why would I report them more? Like someone I've never heard of. Like, I mean, if someone big account did it, then I might do, because I want to add to the number of reports that they're getting for abusing people. But for some nobody, I wouldn't waste my time. But even if I had, like, I don't have the power to choose who Twitter acts on. Twitter came up with its own policies and arbitrarily enforces them, like, doesn't stick to them at all. But even then, even if I had been the person to report them, and that was the thing that Twitter decided, and Twitter unjustly decided or whatever, you don't get kicked off Twitter from one tweet. You get a 12-hour lockout, then you get a 24-hour one, and you get a 7-day one. So they've obviously been suspended loads of times for harassing people. And this was the final one. And, like, if I had the power to ban people, I would have banned you ages ago, mate. Like, what are you talking about? How could I even do this? It doesn't make any sense at all. It's so ridiculous. But I was so confused about this at the time, and like, and of course it has to be I'm getting lesbians banned, because he's always got to pretend to be, like, you know, the king of lesbians or whatever. It's just so every single aspect of this is so pathetic, but it's just so annoying that when, you know, straight cis men who are misogynistic, homophobic and transphobic in general are in power, like we were discussing earlier, they can harm people just by their words and actions. And this is exactly why you don't want misogynists in power, because they can make things up about women who they don't like, and then those things often stick because they have all the power, they have all the voice, and you know, the people they're targeting don't have a voice to respond. So when you just say Katie is banning lesbians somehow because I work for Twitter and can bypass all their policies, and chose some random person to ban rather than, like, someone who's harassing women daily, then, you know, that there were, at the time, there were worse accounts than even Graham Linehan on Twitter. There were significantly worse accounts. There was all kind of, like, neo-Nazi hate groups, and, like, Alex Jones, I think, was still on Twitter then. Like, if I was banning people, I mean, someone who I don't know is not going to be on the priority list. But even then, even people I do know, there were worse. Anyway, this was when I read this, I laughed out loud and I had to explain to my family what had happened. It's so ridiculous. It's a shame that it's ended up with some potentially lifetime ramifications for me to just make this garbage up. I mean, for weeks and weeks after this incident, random gender critical people replied to me asking me why I ban lesbians from Twitter. And just completely uncritically believe the most ridiculous stories about trans people. Yeah. Anyway, so that was our final one. That was our most Christmassy thing, and it was a bit of a rant. And I hope that your Christmas isn't that pathetic. So, oh, look who's here. Ooh. Yay, Poppy! So thank you everyone for stopping by for this very Christmas themed throughout episode of This Week in the TERF Wars. I am not going to be here next week because it's Christmas. I'm not sure about the week after, but I thought this could be like a nice end to season 1. And perhaps I'll come up with some changes and some new cool scene transitions and a new intro. Well, probably not a new intro because I love the one I've got. But I'm going to do some changes. And I'd really like, if anyone's got any ideas of maybe I could do like a stupidest comment of the week, or I could shorten it down, or I could make it longer, but you probably don't want it longer, or just like anything like feedback on how I could make this better or funnier, or what kinds of tweets should I focus on? Like, do you like the ones where I explain in loads of details, or do you like the ones where we just laugh together at how pathetic people are? Anyway, I'd love to know. Hit me up on Twitter or write in the comments. And I hope that everyone has a really lovely Christmas. So happy Christmas from me and Poppy.